Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. To our sponsors and guests, welcome. My name is Barton Green from 3plus, and I'll be sharing the MC duties today with Melissa Downs from Channel 9. We do have a very full agenda today, as I'm sure you will appreciate, so we will be serving and clearing meals during this introduction and during the Q&A later on, and we invite you to please continue eating while those sessions are underway. Thank you. The idea of this event was ambitious to say the least, and we were delighted that representatives of these 10 projects were all able to be in the same place at the same time. It's worth noting, if I can get my slide to work, there we go. It's worth noting that when the event concept was presented to each of the projects, it was received enthusiastically, with many observing that something like this needed to happen to explain the connectivity between the projects and their benefits to Brisbane, and we hope to explore some of that today. The Queensland Media Club is the official political, business and media forum of the Queensland Parliament Media Gallery and the Media, Entertainment and Arts Alliance. We are able to support these events only through the generous support of our sponsors, and I'd like to acknowledge them now. Our naming rights sponsors for 2018-19 are Brisbane Airport Corporation, the Civil Contractors Federation and Griffith University. Our season partners are Arrow Energy and Dial Before You Dig. Our club partners are New Hope Group, Telstra, Shell QGC, Dexus and the Queensland Futures Institute. And our two official partners are the Brisbane Convention and Exhibition Centre and the managers of the Queensland Media Club, 3plus. Would you please thank all of our sponsors? I'd now like to introduce our projects and our speakers. Melissa will quickly reintroduce all of our guests to you once they take the stage after lunch, and I would ask you to please make them all welcome at that time. Cross River Rail will be a 10.2 kilometre rail line from Dutton Park to Bowen Hills, including a 5.9 kilometre tunnel under the Brisbane River and CBD. This $5.4 billion Queensland Government project is fully funded and will be finished in 2024. It will include 4 new underground stations and revitalised stations at Bogger Road, Wollongabba, which you can see on the slide behind me, Albert Street and Roma Street, and upgrades to the Dutton Park and exhibition stations. Cross River Rail will be represented today by CEO Graeme Newton. Queen's Wharf Brisbane is an integrated resort development that will transform our capital city. This is a $3.6 billion project being delivered by the Destination Brisbane Consortium, with the core integrated development scheduled for completion in 2022 and 2 significant heritage building conversions completed in 2024. The development will bring 50 new restaurants, cafes and bars, a new 1,500-seat ballroom, outdoor cinema, laneway precincts, 4 new hotels, plus outdoor dining and entertainment spaces, including a sky deck at 100 metres above ground level. Queen's Wharf Brisbane is represented by Geoff Hogg, Managing Director of the consortium lead partner, the Star Entertainment Group. Brisbane Live will be a new 18,000-seat capacity indoor arena to be built over the Roma Street railway yards. It will replace the Brisbane Entertainment Centre at Boondall. This is a concept by AEG Ogden. Its value is estimated at $2 billion and could be completed by 2023 if the business case stacks up. That report is due this month. Brisbane Live is represented by Harvey Lister, Chairman and CEO of AEG Ogden. And I must say, Harvey, if this image is correct, and the Rolling Stones are still playing in 2023, when Mick and Keith are both 80, I'm there. Thanks. Waterfront Precinct is a proposal to transform Eagle Street Pier into a mixed-use riverside precinct, including the closure of a section of Eagle Street to vehicles to create a pedestrian and cyclist-friendly environment. This is a market-led proposal from Dexus with a project value of $1.4 billion and subject to approvals, a completion date of 2026. The proposal includes 2 new towers with the potential for commercial, residential apartments, a hotel and retail spaces and 1.5 hectares of public and riverfront open space. Waterfront Precinct is represented today by Matthew Beasley, Office Development Queensland for Dexus. Brisbane's new runway is described as Queensland's most important piece of aviation infrastructure. This Brisbane Airport Corporation project is valued at $1.3 billion and is scheduled for completion in mid-2020. When the runway opens, Brisbane's airport capacity will effectively double to meet domestic and international visitor growth well into the future. The project is represented today by Gert-Jan de Graaff, CEO of Brisbane Airport Corporation. Herston Quarter is a 5-hectare site adjacent to the Royal Brisbane Women's Hospital, which has been turned into a health and wellbeing precinct. This $1.1 billion project is being developed by Australian Unity. The first specialist public health facilities will be completed in 2020 and the whole precinct by 2023. Herston Quarter will include a public health facility, private hospital, aged care and retirement living, residential and student accommodation, childcare, car parking and an array of public spaces. Herston Quarter is represented by Richard McLachlan, the project's Development Director for Australian Unity. West Village, a 2.6 hectare regeneration project that will include 9 apartment buildings and nearly 1 hectare of open space with a mix of galleries, boutiques, alfresco dining, traders and merchants, all linked by laneways. Being developed by Japan's largest residential developer, Sekisui House, this $1 billion project will welcome its first residents in just a couple of weeks, and the whole project will be completed by 2023. At the heart of the project are the heritage-listed Peter's Ice Cream Factory and Ice Cream Cone Factory built in the 1920s. Representing West Village is Project Director Andrew Thompson. Brisbane Metro will deliver a 21-kilometre turn-up-and-go bus service with 2 dedicated lines connecting 18 stations from 8 Mile Plains to Roma Street and Royal Brisbane Women's Hospital to the University of Queensland. This is a Brisbane City Council project valued at $944 million with services scheduled to commence in 2023. Brisbane Metro will use existing busway infrastructure with a new fleet of 60 Metro vehicles, each able to carry up to 150 passengers, running every 3 minutes in peak hour and 24 hours a day on weekends. The Chairman of Public and Active Transport for Brisbane City Council, Deputy Mayor Councillor Adrian Schrinner, is representing Brisbane Metro. Howard Smith Wharves, an entertainment, dining and tourism destination that is reactivating 3.4 hectares underneath the Story Bridge. This $200 million project is being developed by Howard Smith Wharves and begins its staged opening in just a few weeks in November 2018. The site will be home to a brewery, restaurants, an overwater bar, green spaces and picnic areas, as well as 2 indoor spaces for up to 1,000 guests and a 5-star boutique hotel. Our speaker today is Luke Fraser, CEO of Howard Smith Wharves. So far, we have introduced projects for planes, trains, buses, cyclists and pedestrians. Our last project is one for ships, very big ships. The Brisbane International Cruise Terminal will be South East Queensland's first dedicated cruise facility. This is a $158 million project being delivered by Port of Brisbane and scheduled for completion in mid-2020. The terminal will be able to accommodate cruise vessels of all sizes, including the world's largest, and is described as an important investment in Queensland's tourism future. Port of Brisbane CEO Roy Cummins is representing the project today. In summary, and to put the scale of these projects into perspective, they represent more than $17 billion in total value. Together, will deliver the equivalent of more than 52 years of construction. They will generate an estimated 35,000 full-time equivalent jobs across the life of the projects, and they will create more than 13 hectares of open space across 5 of the new precincts. That's not including open spaces that Cross River Rail will create once their project has been further developed. As this timeline indicates, Brisbane is going to be a busy place over the next few years, and we will explore those impacts during the Q&A session. Before I finish, we have a lucky door prize to draw. A bottle of Henschke's Henry 7, donated by the Civil Contractors Federation. If you put your business card in our little container here, I'll announce our lucky winner. And the winner of our bottle of Henschke's is Ronnie Woods from Rojo Cabs. If you'd like to see the desk out the front at the end, Ronnie, you can collect your prize. Thank you. I'll leave you now with a short video produced by the Cross River Rail Authority, the Delivery Authority. It profiles most of our 10 projects and a couple that we haven't got on stage today, and gives you a great snapshot of what is coming for Brisbane. Please continue to enjoy your meals and the company at your tables. Melissa and our guests will join you after lunch for the Q&A. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to begin the Q&A session for today's lunch. My name is Melissa Downs from Channel 9, and it's my pleasure to be here. And then my guests today, I'm going to let everyone find their seat. And we can all sit down, I think. So starting on this side of the table, of the stage, I have Andrew Thompson, Project Director, West Village for Sekasui House. Then we have for Waterfront Precinct, Matthew Beasley, Office Development Queensland for Dexus. For Brisbane's new runway, Gert-Jan de Graaff, CEO of Brisbane Airport Corporation. For Brisbane Live, Harvey Lister, CEO and Chairman of AEG Ogden. For Cross River Rail, Graeme Newton, CEO of the Cross River Rail Delivery Authority. Then we have on this side, for Brisbane Metro, Councillor Adrian Schrinner, Deputy Mayor and Chairman, Public and Active Transport, Brisbane City Council. For Queen's Wharf, Geoff Hogg, Queensland Managing Director of the Star Entertainment Group. For the International Cruise Terminal, Roy Cummins, CEO, Port of Brisbane. We have Luke Fraser, CEO of the Howard Smith Wharves, and Richard McLachlan, Development Director, Herston Quarter for Australian Unity. So it is pretty impressive to have all of these gentlemen in the one place at the one time. And when we see all of these developments that are happening in Brisbane, I was talking to someone earlier today saying, I remember when South Bank was the biggest thing to happen to Brisbane, and when you look at what is going to happen in the next few years, in some ways we do wonder, what is Brisbane going to become and how is it going to cope? But I'm interested to find out, when you look at all of the things that are happening, do you, and this is a question for all of you, how do you all see your, I guess, social responsibility to interact with each other and play along with each other so that Brisbane gets the best out of your projects? So, who would like to start?
I'll start.
Yeah.
I've got to say, I mean, Brisbane as a city is a really nice place to do business. And for those in the room who have travelled to other parts of the world, and Sydney and Melbourne, you'll know that here the business community is naturally really collaborative. We are very parochial, and we are really proud of this city. And I know all of the people up here with us are all really keen to work together, and ultimately for Brisbane, the story for us in our success of the future is actually all of us working together. It's really important. No one of these projects alone will be able to do it. We do need to work together, and I'm sure from the conversations, even the conversations around the table today, that everyone is really keen to do that.
How do you work together though? I mean, do you actually call each other up and say, what's happening?
Yeah, well, certainly for us, we've been working a lot with the Brisbane Airport. I mean, that second runway development gave us the confidence to be able to do what's going to happen with Queen's Wharf. And for us, you're always working and driving an outcome together. I mean, for tourism, our competition is primarily the other states. And it's our collective offering together in this region. And we talk about the region, we talk Brisbane, but you talk about that 2-3 hour drive radius. Collectively, everything that we have on show here, collectively is what's competing with other states. And therefore we work together, drive together to get extra visitation, and our developments are going to complement each other.
I can perhaps add a bit more sort of tangible example of that for you. The Brisbane International Cruise Terminal, for us, is really a missing link in the overall transport puzzle that's being put together. So it's really interdependent on the success of the other projects. And to echo what Geoff has said, I mean, we, for example, have incorporated into the design of our terminal a VIP lounge facility, which is very much with the Queen's Wharf guests in mind. Equally, we have worked with the staff at the airport. There's absolutely clear synergies between the seamless transfer of passengers and baggage between the airport and the cruise facility. So these are very much the ongoing interactions that we have as part of the overall project development.
I guess to look at the Herston Quarter project, which sits next to the Royal Brisbane Women's Hospital, one of the largest hospitals in Queensland and the biggest referral hospital in Queensland. For people to be able to get to the hospital, it's particularly important. So the Metro and Cross River Rail both are very proximate to us and very important to us to be able to move people around the city and to that really important facility 2 k's north of the city.
From this side?
I'll jump in. I mean, picking up on that point there, when I first got involved in the Cross River Rail project, that was the thing that sort of struck me, was the need to recognise that this is a project that actually goes right the way through the middle of the core of the city. And while I'm sure it'll be an impressive piece of infrastructure, people aren't going to come to Brisbane to go for a ride on the train. It's going to be going to destinations, and whether it is for work, say to Herston Quarter, or for entertainment to Brisbane Live, whether it's staying at Queen's Wharf. I mean, the proximity of those stations is what's going to make it really important, and the association between us and our projects, but then also aligning how we're going about delivering, having an awareness of who's doing what when is going to be very important. And then also, if our project can add value and create some support, say for the Dexus project and the MLP, where you can have some insight as to, well, what's the patronage, how's the accessibility going to be, then those are the sorts of things where we work effectively together.
But I also think too that Brisbane has, from a West Village perspective, we're a neighbourhood development, and what's interesting is Brisbane has one of Australia's best climates, so we have all these projects, but connecting between each of those projects is absolutely critical, because the journey between them all should be as good as the projects themselves. And we've been working with council and state government on that, on how we can integrate our parklands with the streets. And so over time, if the streets become greener, more active, more boulevard-like, connecting between them, we should all be able to walk between the projects and really create an exceptional experience for visitors.
Yeah, for Brisbane Airport, it's pretty obvious that collaboration will be the key to success. It sounds funny, but there's not a single airline or passenger that flies to an airport or a runway. They fly to destinations. And we are the enabler of a lot of the activities, a lot of the projects that are being presented today. And at the same time, we're very dependent on the success of those activities and those projects. And we're very well aware of that. So we're very keen to work closely together with each and every one of here to position Brisbane as a destination and to create a vibrant community that is proud of the airport.
And I think Brisbane Live provides an opportunity for a very active arena right in the middle of the city. We don't only activate the precinct where these events happen, but we also activate a lot of other businesses, and there are rental car companies and hotels that tell us that every room in their hotel is full every time we have a major event in the city, wherever that happens to be. So event tourism, of course, around the world is much sought after, and in Brisbane we're very fortunate that we punch above our weight. So the opportunity to do this in the middle of the city in the Roma Street Railway Yards, and also as part of Cross River Rail to activate that above ground plane of that precinct brings people, brings activity and lighting, that brings safety. And I think our obligation will be to interface with everybody else in the city to let them know when events are happening and let hotels and bars and clubs know when shows are going to finish, and allow people to gear up and staff up, which is one of the big challenges, to enable them to do that in advance, really deliver the economic impact for Brisbane.
Matt, still in proposals.
Probably just to build on it, I think if you look at the projects that are up here, it's a combination of all the asset classes, but also the infrastructure that sits underneath it. And I mean, Tomo made a good point. It's actually just as important about the spaces in between. I mean, Waterfront Precinct, when you put it in the context of those projects, is really the fundamental sort of professional and financial services, CBE heart for employment. So whilst we can have all these other great projects, we need to make sure that remains a really strong core for the city. Certainly it's part of the city that hasn't seen any major investment since the redevelopment of Eagle Street Pier in '89. So, if we can unlock that opportunity, ties in very closely with Cross River Rail as a core public transport connection, but then also introducing the river and connections around to Howard Smith Wharves and Queen's Wharf. So I think it's important they all seem to play sort of a complementary role rather than trying to necessarily compete.
Adrian, I think you're the only one who hasn't quite finished that question, but I'm going to lead that on to the next, which really relates to you and Cross River Rail. I mean, in the past, it hasn't always been an especially harmonious relationship, should we say. One state, one's council. In a way, though, it is your responsibility more than any of the others, because it is publicly funded, that you do work together. And how are you doing that?
That's a great point. Of all the projects here, there's only two that are primarily government funded, and that's Metro and Cross River Rail. The rest are privately funded. And so all the projects rely on each other. They're interlinked, but in particular the transport projects are essential in making sure we can facilitate this new development and growth for the city. Council knows that Cross River Rail and Brisbane Metro are complementary, and I'm sure Graeme will agree with that. Like, we need both of these projects. We need them to work together. If we have the view that there should be either one project or the other, our city is missing out and the region is missing out. So we shouldn't be having that false argument. The argument is, what are the next round of projects after Cross River Rail and Brisbane Metro to facilitate the growth? So we've been working really closely together. I bump into Graeme at least probably once a week through various events, and most of the other gentlemen here as well. Council is dealing with constantly. I know the state government is dealing with constantly to make sure we're all on the same page. We know what the latest developments are in each project, and we're working to resolve any issues that come up.
Yeah, and looks, again, when I first got involved, the aim was to really get that connection and get the association. I mean, we've matched our transport modelling, so there's this real interplay between how we will be effectively operating together. There's the Bogger Road interchange, there's the Roma Street interchange, and really if you look at what area that Metro services and then where Cross River Rail enables greater level of heavy rail right out to the Gold Coast and all the way to Sunshine Coast and out to Ipswich. The two really complement each other and allow the ability for people to move between them. I mean, if you can catch a train one every 7+ minutes or thereabouts, and then you get into the inner core and you need to move to another point, and you've got during peak, 2 to 3 minute headways, that ability to move between modes of transport. I mean, that's what you do in any great city around the world. You don't look at the timetable, you turn up and go. So we've been embedding that in our dialogue. I've briefed Civic Cabinet on multiple occasions with a really good reception from both Deputy Mayor and the Mayor. And I'm also a member of the sort of government reference group for Metro as well, and that's been welcomed. And then conversely, we have a MOU between ourselves and Brisbane City Council now that's been signed, and we have ongoing working groups, and really everything from property-related matters to town planning-related matters to the technical components. Where are the trucks going to be moving in and out of the city during the construction phase? So we're really integrated now.
And is that how projects like yours survive past changes of government?
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, the infrastructure goes through a long gestation period, but we really are, both projects are at that stage where there's heavy levels of commitment. I mean, on Friday, our large PPP tenders were submitted, and we're into that intense evaluation phase. Council's well advanced in their procurement phase, and I think we're at that stage now where it's commonly accepted that the projects are interrelated and that they're going ahead, so that's the focus.
I mean, it is going to be a massive time of, there'll be traffic disruptions, all of those sorts of things, and we're going to touch on that a little bit later. But Harvey, when we look at what is all of these things that are happening in Brisbane, do we need Brisbane Live now? Is it something that there are going to be so many things happening in Brisbane? Do we need it now, or do you have to jump on this moment of change and get involved?
Well, we jumped on the concept, Melissa, in 2007, so we're getting there.
It's not an overnight success.
But in fact, that's when we actually registered the business name Brisbane Live. I think in operating the entertainment centre originally for the city and then for the state, we recognised that venue was built as part of an Olympic Games bid as a gymnastics venue. There is now 3 generations of arena designs around the world that have moved forward from those times, and Brisbane is the one capital city in the country that doesn't have a major competitive, properly located indoor arena. One of the reasons that it hasn't happened earlier is that because of our network of venues, we actually get everything that tours. And so we've always had this struggle to say, gee, there's 20 or 30 acts that aren't coming to Brisbane because. So what we had to focus on was the patron experience. These days, we don't sell tickets, we are selling experiences. And I think that will be one of the great changes that the public will notice in coming to the new arena in the Roma Street precinct. So yes, I think its time has come.
Lovely, because I'm one of those who would much rather something close to the city rather than driving all that way. So, and that's what a lot of people talk about. So
yeah, well, let me say that for half the people who have to drive further, the other half will have to drive or travel further when it's in the city. But I think that the common sense of having the state's capital city's major transport interchange in all forms of transport, I think is you just can't go past that for convenience.
So Madonna can go as late as she wants, and we don't have to worry about everyone getting home.
Madonna can. I think Bruce Springsteen's the one who says, "I want to play indoors because I want to play as long and as loud as I want to."
Yeah. All right, thank you. Well, now I'm going to turn over to Richard McLachlan here, and I think I'm probably not the only one in the room who, probably for a lot of people here, your project, the Herston Quarter, is the one we know least about. It is on the former Children's Hospital site. How does it fit into this 10 projects picture, and does it play a role beyond its neighbourhood?
Well, certainly the Royal Brisbane Women's Hospital site is significant both in Brisbane and in Queensland. Nearly 1,000 beds. as I said earlier, the largest referral hospital in Queensland. So it really punches above its weight in terms of the role that it plays, both in Queensland and in servicing people from northern New South Wales. So there's a great opportunity there to redevelop the former Children's Hospital site and turn it into something that's really special and integrated. The RBWH site is part of the Herston Health Precinct, and within that precinct there's a big presence from the Queensland Institute of Medical Research, Queensland University of Technology and University of Queensland. So not only are there health services provided, but a significant amount of research, education and other activity in the precinct. So the Herston Health Precinct itself is a very important part of the provision of health services into Queensland. And what we're able to bring there is an integrated outcome where we will deliver a public health facility, a private hospital, retirement living, aged care and student accommodation, and then a range of ancillary services around it. So, and the connecting spaces are things that are really important to make sure that it plays a really key role in the city.
I mean, we have heard recently this talk of aged care, that people want to live in the city, or they want to live close to the city. Could there be a tourism element to what you're doing as well by, I mean, people who are wanting to move into that sort of aged care but want to do it in a particular way?
Well, we know that people typically want to retire within close proximity to where they live, but they also want to retire in places where there is amenity and quality of life. And so that's why the activation of the public spaces is really important to provide that level of amenity. The other thing, thinking about tourism from a different aspect, is medical tourism. We know that the Royal Brisbane Women's Hospital provides services to a very broad area. We know that people come to the hospital from a long way away and often have to stay for days after treatment because they're not well enough to go home. So there is a different sort of tourism, and it's all a part of Brisbane providing amenity for its residents and for the people of Queensland and beyond.
Okay, thank you, Richard. So 4 of our projects are very much described as, I guess, having a water focus. So we have the International Cruise Terminal, the Smith Wharves, Waterfront Precinct and Queen's Wharf. So for those projects, how important is the river to you? And I guess that's self-explanatory, Roy, with the cruise project. But I guess to extend on that, also how will the River City benefit from what you're doing? And I'll get you to start, Roy, and then the others can join in.
Thanks, Melissa. As a relative newcomer to Brisbane, I am often struck by the fact that Brisbane sometimes seems to turn its back on its best attribute, which is the river. And certainly from a port's perspective, we have probably one of the world's best ports, and very few people in this room would even know that. It's fantastic.
I didn't. Why? What makes it the best port?
It is unencumbered, it has room to grow, and it has some of the best trade lane connectivity anywhere in the world. So we're very blessed, and yet that's relatively unknown. We're trying to do our bit to change that with the cruise terminal. The Brisbane International Cruise Terminal will allow the world's largest and most glamorous liners to call within 30 minutes of the CBD. That's a pretty big change. And that is going to enable hundreds of thousands of visitors every year to enjoy all of the projects which are being discussed here today. So I think it's great from a point of using the city's river attributes, but also the economic value add that our project, through interoperation with the other projects, will generate for the local community is really very significant, and we should probably talk about that more. Also, hopefully, it will be the catalyst for greater transport connectivity on the river, because there is the opportunity to connect the Brisbane International Cruise Terminal to the bay and the outer islands, and of course all of the river entertainment complexes and amenities which are being developed. So it's pretty exciting in that regard.
Yeah, certainly when I look at it from a Queen's Wharf perspective, it is about showcasing the heart of our city, which is the river. And we've learnt a lot from South Banks. And when we did the design of the public realm, Queen's Wharf's got an area for which, let's be honest, it's not a great area to go to today and activate the river. So by learning from South Bank, by getting some of the guys that have worked on South Bank for so long in our design team, they've created a space which we believe people will really enjoy. And the key thing from a tourist perspective is it's the same with South Bank. Tourists want to go where locals go. South Bank's so successful because we all use it. We love going to South Bank. So from our perspective, we do our developments and create spaces where the locals like to go, then it's also successful for tourists. So very much on all our designs, we're about creating spaces for locals to enjoy our river, our city.
The first thing to say, most underutilised asset with unrealised potential is pretty consistent across all the projects. In terms of waterfront, the real thing there is how do you create a world-class waterfront precinct that caters for the needs of the workers? And the Golden Triangle works very well Monday to Friday, but obviously as a destination on the weekend it lacks when you've only got a 1.5 to 2.5 metre wide boardwalk where there's a few congestion issues. So the opportunity that we're exploring is very much about how do you actually bring the development back and open up the waterfront itself, with generosity and quality of space, and really create another civic space that Brisbane can celebrate. And that's really trying to grow its profile more as just a working destination. It's a lifestyle destination on a 7-day basis, but then you start tying it into the cruise ship terminal, the connectivity in the river, it then starts emphasising it as another tourism gateway for the city itself. So in looking at the project, we have to look at the other ones because otherwise you're sort of undercooking the opportunity.
So with all of these things happening, we saw the graph earlier which showed the timeline for all of these 10 projects. It is going to get congested between now and 2023. So do any of you have any idea what it is going to be like living in Brisbane over these next few years when all of these things are being built and happening? I mean, the number of trucks on the road, the number of tunnels being built, I mean, all of this sort of development. Adrian, perhaps you can answer that. Are we all going to want to go and live in the country?
There will be disruption, there's no doubt about that.
That's such a sweet way of saying it, isn't it?
There will be some short-term pain for long-term gain, but in particular...
Short-term, though, we're talking a couple of years.
Well, that is short-term compared to the pain we would experience if we didn't have Cross River Rail and Brisbane Metro. You need these projects for the long term. Otherwise, the traffic congestion and the chaos would be permanent if we didn't have those transport projects. So I guess it's one of those things. It's probably a good thing that it's all happening at once. That way it'll all be finished at once, and the benefits for the city economically will be just incredible. So we're working closely with Cross River Rail to try and manage those, the two projects and how they be constructed together. But also with the other privately funded projects, the same thing is happening. Each of those projects does require state government and council approvals in the main to do what they need to do. So it's all about sitting down and making sure we can manage those impacts.
Graeme?
Can I?
Yeah.
Look, I was just going to say, look, it's exceptionally exciting time to be in Brisbane. I mean, if you're in the construction industry, how exciting is it for the next 4 or 5 years? Which project are you going to work on? From an industry perspective, we've also got to prepare for these developments because it comes quickly. So we're looking at 2022. We're going to need more supply of great Queensland seafood, Queensland produce. So we're already out now talking to suppliers about how do they gear up and prepare for the demand that's coming. We're going to have a tourism boom coming in the 2020s. And Brisbane is the place they want to come to. We're going to not just be the gateway to Queensland with the Brisbane airport, it's going to start getting more flights than other cities in Australia. So we've got to see this as an exciting opportunity. When I look at projects like Metro and Cross River Rail and the airport, that's infrastructure and tourism. So we've got a tourism boom that's coming and people should get excited about it, accept a little bit of pain in the short term, but the opportunity for career growth and construction and ongoing jobs is unbelievable. I'd rather live in a city that's going through that than one that's not got development and projects going. So for me, it's very exciting.
Do you think Brisbane residents understand that, though?
Well, I mean, we recently announced that we're going to demolish the Brisbane Transit Centre, and that was met with rapturous joy. So I think there's a real desire for the disruption that we're talking about. Look, that's a bit facetious, but the demolition of the transit centre is one of those things that will come with the project, but that's bringing us forward, creating that gateway, that front door at Roma Street, which will become that sort of key hub, and tying in with the project Harvey's talking about, and linking in with the airport and all of those things. So it does come with disruption. I mean, the demolition of that transit centre will disrupt people moving into and out of Roma Street, and we're really looking at that intensely. But we're working with council around how we do the other developments that we're going to do. I mean, the TBMs that will do the tunnels, the spoil will go back to the Woolloongabba site, and that's right near the motorway. So there's all plans have been put in place looking at how do we manage the level of interruption. There's no great surprise why the Gabba is chosen as the predominant construction site, because it's right near the highway there. So there will be disruption, but as I sort of point to with the transit centre, some of it will be good disruption.
And Melissa, it's not like the city hasn't been going through rapid change already. I mean, if you rolled back 10 years ago and looked at the city that we had then, already there's been a huge amount of development in this last decade. So I think it's a city which is, it's growing fast, and obviously there's plans in place to continue that growth and make sure we plan it well. But I think we are used to that change. So it's really exciting now. Sure, there's going to be more of it, but I think we're really used to that. I think the city's genuinely excited about what has happened and what is coming.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think it's all about managing disruption, and we should do that as good as we can. And therefore, it's very important that we coordinate the activities going on in the city. But I think there's a lot of support for the activities that are going on. To give you a little bit of a background, we've got 24,000 people working at the airport with more than 425 companies. That means that, give and take, 2.5 million people in Brisbane, 1 in 100 people living in Brisbane works at the airport. Queensland, 5 million people, 1 in every 200 people works at the airport. And then I'm not talking about all those other companies in tourism or in construction that one way or the other are delivering services to what we're doing. And I think that's the strength of this city. Yes, there is a bit of a burden, there's some disruption, but on the other hand, it brings a lot of good, and that makes this a very good city for everyone to live in and to work.
One of the other points that comes up when we do talk about all this development is heritage and the maintaining those heritage elements that we have. So, Andrew, with West Village, Bart was saying earlier, the Paul's ice cream factories, keeping that. How's that been incorporated, and how tricky is it to keep those elements as part of the project?
Yeah, I think the key thing with heritage is that we've got a collective responsibility to maintain the stories of the past for future generations. That, to me, is heritage. And I think we can get lost in sort of what's the colour of the doorknob, how's the actual fabric going to be, and then forget the story about what the place actually was about. And you just pointed out exactly the point. It's Peter's ice cream factory rather than Paul's.
Oh dear.
Because the point being that when I started working on the project, I'd say 4 years ago, we're working on the Peter's ice cream factory, and everyone would say, oh yeah, the one by the river, great site. And I'd say, oh, actually it's on Boundary Street, and that's the old Abso site, and so people would maybe recall it. And they'd say, the gun shop, just behind the gun shop that's there. So 75 years of supplying Queensland with ice cream had largely been lost. So before we started actually restoring the heritage buildings, we thought, how can we get that story back into the mental map of Brisbane people? And we had a bit of we were looking at New York. They opened a museum of ice cream, so we thought, oh, maybe we could do a ice cream festival. We'd had a bit of rough trot with planning, so we wanted to celebrate. So we said, we'll do an ice cream festival, and it was absolutely fantastic. We thought we might get 1,000 people. We got over 6,000. Well, sorry, we had 28,000 people on Facebook register. And anyway, we've started to do that each year now, and the design of the public realm is actually designed for future ice cream festivals, and that's before we even renovated any of the buildings. And I think that's the key. We can get really stuck in what the buildings look like, how they're restored, but if we can focus on the storytelling about them, involve Brisbane Open House, which we're doing this Saturday and Sunday, the Brisbane Greeters, get those stories into the social consciousness, I think that's what Brisbane Heritage should be about.
I go for a walk a few times a week, and I walk past on the other side of the river, past the Howard Smith Wharves. So, I mean, you've also had your share of
Yeah, and look, I think when a lot of people looked at the Howard Smith Wharves opportunity originally, I think the heritage components may have scared a few people off. But in fact, for us, it was one of the real attractors. When you go down there and you walk on that old heritage wharf, when you go into those wharf sheds, they are just beautiful buildings, and it's really hard to recreate that history and that look and the feel in a new building. So it's something that really attracted us to the opportunity, and right from the outset, we really wanted to embrace that. I agree with Andrew. It's about storytelling. It's about letting future generations know about all the great things that have happened in those buildings, and we plan to do a lot of that. We've been recently awarded by the National Trust Heritage Hero status. So it's our commitment to those buildings, those great old buildings, to try and, wherever possible, keep as much of them as we can. They're in varying states of disrepair, and that's been definitely challenging along the way, but it's been a real hidden gem of the site, and we just think that people coming down there are going to love to see these old buildings, and for the first time, publicly accessible.
Yeah, and I think that was the key thing for Queen's Wharf. We've got 9 heritage buildings within the precinct that today no one really gets to use them. They were either government buildings or they were part of the casino offering, and therefore limited accessibility. So we wanted to make sure in the master plan that all 9 get activated 365 days a year so locals and tourists can enjoy them. We've worked very closely with the National Trust, who will house themselves in one of those buildings within the precinct and really focus on telling the heritage story, not just of Brisbane but of Queensland. So when people are coming to our city, they can go there, talk to the National Trust, go on a heritage trail, not just around Brisbane but the whole state. But for us, it's very much about activation of hotels, bars, restaurants. Food and beverage are fantastic in heritage buildings, and obviously the signature piece with the land administration building being the Ritz-Carlton for Brisbane. When the Ritz came to Brisbane and saw the development of Queen's Wharf, they said instantly they wanted to have a heritage hotel and they wanted it to be in that building. So I think that's going to be the most signature part of the development, but very proud that all 9 buildings will be activated for everybody to enjoy.
And Richard, you also have to deal with heritage issues.
Yes, we do, and the Lamington Towers that sit on the top of the hill behind the hospital with their terracotta roofs would be a landmark for most Queenslanders. And similar themes to what the other guys have talked about, we have an opportunity to celebrate those buildings. Their previous use was for nurses' quarters, and they'll be returned to that kind of use for student accommodation. And for us, the Heritage Precinct at Herston provides the opportunity to provide and to create a core of activity and a focal point that we really want to celebrate and turn that into an activity space. It'll be where our retail sits. It'll be potentially where some of the service provision for the retirement and aged care sits, medical centres, short stay accommodation, those sorts of things. So there are challenges in redeveloping those buildings, but the potential of creating something really special and iconic and the hub of our site is really exciting.
So one of the other motivations of today was looking at, yes, we've got all these projects going on. Are we going to have the people to come to them? So I guess this question is for Roy and you, Gert-Jan. I mean, your developments, your projects, yes, you're going to have people coming in and you're going to bring people in, but often Brisbane is a gateway and tourists go elsewhere. Are these other projects that are happening enough to keep people in Brisbane? Do you think people are going to spend more time in Brisbane?
I think they will. Currently there are 23.4 million passengers flying to and from Brisbane Airport annually. We believe that we will double that volume within 20 years' time. So those people will travel to and from Queensland and they will stay in Brisbane as long as we develop activities, a market for them. Currently, we've got quite a good offering in Brisbane, and that will only be better in the near future. So we're working closely with Tourism and Events Queensland, Brisbane Marketing, The Star, and many other regional tourism organisations to attract international travellers to fly to Brisbane, to stay here for a few days, ideally. And then we don't mind if they fly to other destinations, but initially we like them to come here or to depart from here. So we believe that that market is there, and there's an interest worldwide in Brisbane. And together with the gentleman here developing projects, destinations in itself, we believe that definitely we will keep people longer in the city than currently. In the discussion we had previously, I told you that I lived in Brisbane between 2007 and 2012. And whenever I ask someone here in Brisbane, well, my family is visiting from Europe, what should I do with them? They say, go to Melbourne, or great coffee, good restaurants, go to Sydney, they've got this fantastic bridge. That's changed. People now tell me, keep them in Brisbane. There's many things to do. South Bank, the museums, the new precincts that are being developed. I think we are a great destination, and this city has a very bright future.
And Roy, how do you, I mean, is it part of your job to try and keep people in Brisbane?
Well, I think if you frame the question as, you know, are these sorts of developments at the cruise terminal or the airport to treat Brisbane as a gateway or as a destination, I think it can be both. We should be frank and say that our cruise terminal and I think the airport are fantastic gateways, and we should be proud of that. They are gateways to some of the most iconic tourism opportunities in the world. However, what's really exciting is, I think, for the first time, with all of these projects, there is a critical mass, there's a jigsaw coming together. And that jigsaw is going to have world-class dining, retail, entertainment, experiences. And I think that will make Brisbane a destination. So I think the timing's great, and I think it can be both.
Can I jump in there? The interesting thing about these major projects is they are privately funded, and private investment doesn't happen unless there's a business case there. And so you can see from that in itself that there is massive optimism about the future and about the future growth in tourism in particular. They wouldn't put the private investment into those assets unless there was a big, and the same with Queen's Wharf as well. So if you look at Dubai and Singapore, they were both examples of gateway cities. They were stopover cities where people were going somewhere else. They both really tried to get people to stay a little bit longer. So people might have just previously gone to the airport, caught another flight, moved on. Now they stay overnight, or now they stay 2 nights. And if we can get that in Brisbane, we can effectively have a doubling or a tripling of our tourism activity. So it's really exciting.
I think that's a great point. We certainly anticipate that with these large cruise ships bringing in hundreds and hundreds of thousands of passengers, increasingly those passengers will want somewhere to stay before and after their trip, and increasingly they'll want to experience things, hotels and food and leisure, and I do think it's a very virtuous circle.
Well, talking of tourism, I mean, 2 of the projects, I guess Queen's Wharf and also Brisbane Live, when that happens, they're only a few blocks from each other, really. And in a way, will you be competing for audiences, and will there be enough people to fill both?
I'm happy to go first. I'm with Harvey. Brisbane Live back in 2008 would have been good, so sooner the better. No, for us, it's very much, these are activity drivers that bring people to the city, so we're very supportive. So you want Brisbane Live, bringing people to stay, activating, and Harvey's spot on. It activates the bars, it activates the restaurants. As a hotel operator, we want to extend people's stay. So we want them to go to a concert one night, get over to South Bank for a day. To be honest, we want them to get out day trips, Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, the whole region. Our real opportunity is to extend their nights. And to extend the nights, you need a variety of attractions that get people so excited. Brisbane Live will be one of those that people will choose this destination because of a concert, an event, but then ideally stay a second or a third night because of all the other activities that are around. So for us, it's very much about growing, not competing, and we see Brisbane Live as an asset that's going to add to our confidence, add to our investment, and give us more. And certainly for us, we're also investing in the Gold Coast. So for us, we talk about Brisbane, but Brisbane is a gateway to Queensland. The more successful we are at bringing tourists into Brisbane, regional tourism benefits for Queensland as well. So a lot of these developments are, yes, great for Brisbane, but they're also very, very positive for the regions as well.
And Melissa, I don't think we're going to be in competition with what's happening at Queen's Wharf at all, and in some other venues we operate in other places. We have a great relationship with the casinos in the market, and it's not because of the casino side, it's just because of the resort side. And if we can help keep people in a market for one additional night, as we try and do here at the Convention Centre with conventions and exhibitions, or at Suncorp Stadium in bringing in Liverpool to play. We have some tricks that we use in how we ticket those to try and make sure that we can make some tickets available for visitors as well, and that's what activates the whole of the economy. So I can see this procession of people after events in the Brisbane Live precinct making their way down George Street and filling Geoff's business up, and I think that'll be terrific. And I think people are going to go across to South Bank precinct, and I think some of them are going to go to the Caxton Street precinct and help poor old Johnny Gambaro nearly break even every night when we fill his restaurant up.
So thank you, Harvey. Very soon we're going to open it to the floor, but in a closing question to those who would like to answer, imagine Brisbane in 10 years' time, 2028. What is it that you see Brisbane will look like for residents and tourists?
I'd like to think that both residents and visitors would look at the Herston Health Precinct as something that is unique and special and very, very positive, and something that would well be replicated elsewhere because of the vision of the Queensland Government and the Metro North Hospital and Health Service in bringing a partner in to deliver a redevelopment with them, and the success of the mixed uses and the complementary range of uses that are in that precinct, and provide a really broad range of positive services for Queenslanders.
I think the key to answer this is the word experience, because increasingly it's our observation that people are spending more and more of their discretionary income on experiences rather than things. So if you cast your mind forward, for us with the cruise terminal, we want to provide the best passenger experience you can imagine when entering or leaving Brisbane. But for Brisbane itself, I think for tourists, that dining, entertaining, retail experience will define the city in a way that it doesn't define it now. But I think for locals too, isn't it great to have a sense of a vibrant city which is exciting to live in, where the restaurants are open past 8 o'clock in the evening? I mean, it's really quite exciting.
They're already open past 8.
You can't take a reservation.
Yes.
I think in terms of in 10 years' time, you'd hope that there's another 10 projects sitting up here talking about what they're in the next generation. Because if you actually see these 10 projects delivered just by itself, it'll act as a real catalyst for those in-between spaces and other areas as we start looking at what are the other next development opportunities in the city itself. So, from a waterfront point of view, I'd like to think that we are recognised as being a very strong commercial destination and competitive against both Sydney and Melbourne, leveraging off the back of the increased capacity and access to Asia that comes through the airport, and obviously sort of the connectivity in the CBD. The CBD is going to be a very different place. It needs to grow its density. It needs to really look at the spaces that are provided, are high quality spaces that do give the opportunity for experiences to be delivered, because if we're going to meet the population targets and growth targets, there's going to have to be that change. So I'd like to think that we're talking about the next generation or the next generation after that of infrastructure and retail, commercial, residential, research, educational experiences that are going to start coming through the CBD and around.
I think I'd like it to be remembered as Australia having the first test in the Gabba again. And we've recovered that, and the lasting experience is the Australian win against the English, and not the 3 hours of standing waiting to get back onto public transport or back into the city. The notion that we've got a good interface at the Gabba, that you can just finish the event, have a great stadium experience, both in and around the stadium, and then hop on the train, and 3 minutes later you're within a couple of minutes walking distance to Queen's Wharf to continue the party.
This next 5 years, I think, and by 10 years in particular, I think it'll be seen as the new Expo 88 for the city. We all know the transformation that had, and everyone refers to it. This 5-year period will be the next equivalent or the new equivalent of that. And so people will view the city differently after this 5-year period. And 2 things I think will happen. Number one, we'll move forward to take the title of Australia's true lifestyle capital. We know how great it is to live here, but it's a best kept secret around the place. But the secret will be out. And secondly, Brisbane residents will actually be proud to say that they're from Brisbane, and they won't feel like the little brother or sister to Sydney or Melbourne. They'll actually be proud as punch to be here, and they'll be telling other people about that. And so those 2 things I think will really transform.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is the key component. Today, a lot of people in Brisbane don't understand how attractive it is a place to be. I think one in 4 of us was born overseas, and we advocate for the city and we love the city. I mean, we're in a city that embraces art and embraces culture, has an unbelievable music scene, and within a short drive, we've got beaches on the Gold Coast, the Sunshine Coast. We live in this amazing, amazing part of the world. But I do think that there's half of Brisbane don't appreciate it and they don't know it. There's more and more people living here and see it the same way I see it every time. Their family visit, their friends visit, people are coming here. Tourists, when they leave, they are amazingly surprised at how good Brisbane is as a destination. Why? Because we're not telling it. With 300 days a year of sunshine, we have no winter. So the story keeps going. So I'm just hoping by 10 years from now, people just sit there locally and are proud of their city and understand that's why people are coming. It's not going to be because of our projects. Hopefully our projects help. But all those things I listed, they're not about our projects. That's who we are. This is the destination we live in. That's what makes it so attractive.
And I think the next 10 years will be really interesting from a resident's point of view, because I think it'll be a city of neighbourhoods where you do actually have have the opportunity to choose where to live because it's close to where you work and it's close to where you want to socialise. And that's the trend that's happening around the world. And I think that's going to be really exciting for Brisbane, that it's a cluster of neighbourhoods that you can get easily accessible between all of those. And I think that's going to be an attractive proposition for people living down south coming to Brisbane. You can always see the interstate migration growing at the moment. I think that's going to continue because we offer a great point of difference.
Yes.
Yeah, I saw my predecessor Julianne Elrow here in the room, and she said a while ago to me, Brisbane is difficult to explain, but it's very easy to experience. And I think that's true. And I think with Geoff that if we do our job well, then in 10 years' time we don't have to explain it anymore. But everyone knows Brisbane and knows that because of the developments that are going on right now. It's all about, I think, developing the experiences. It's all about connectivity and making sure that people can get around, the livability of the city. And last but not least, it's about continuous improvement, continuous investment. The runway that's mentioned today is a $1.3 billion project, but it's part of a $4 billion program. We will not stop. This city will develop like the airport will develop. And I think that's the core of what we're trying to do today, to make sure to each and every one here that we can really proud of what's going on in the city, and it will set us up for a very bright future.
Yeah, and we shouldn't underestimate how important an asset is our people. It's an amazingly friendly and welcoming place when you come here. There's a lot of multicultural cities around the world, but when you come to Brisbane, all those cultures come together and it's friendly and it's welcoming. We're building assets, but our people are unbelievable.
It's the big country town. That's what we want to be modern, but we also still want to be a big country town, because I think that's the cultural aspect of Brisbane that makes us what we are. All right, we are going to open the questions to the floor. So if you have a question to ask, if you could stand up and say your name and where you're from. And I'm just wondering, are there microphones on the floor? Media only questions, sorry. We don't mind. You don't mind? Are there any questions from the floor?
Hello, Tegan George from Network 10. We've seen a lot of these projects...
Can you stand up so we can see you? Yes,
great,
thank you.
Okay.
Sorry.
We've seen a lot of these projects used as political footballs over the years. Finally, they're all coming together at once. How comfortable are you with this current state government overseeing such a significant period in Brisbane's history? And do you foresee significant ramifications should we have a change of government in 2020?
I think I'll abstain.
Who's game?
I'll start. I mean, certainly from our perspective, when you're investing in the long term and you're thinking about these investments don't make a return in the short term, it is about long-term commitments, having that confidence that you've got the government, and if a government changed, you've got continuity and certainty about it is very, very important. So certainly from a Queen's Wharf perspective, knowing that we have the support of both the government and the opposition and the support of the state as well as the council, don't underestimate how important that is. And certainly from our perspective, we're very pleased that we have that engagement and that support and can get on and develop Queen's Wharf with the confidence that everyone understands the benefits it is for the city and the state.
Australia used to be a place where there was seen as little or no sovereign risk. Unfortunately, that has changed for the worse. And we cannot afford to have a situation where projects are used as a political football and whether it's an opposition or whatever threatens to cancel a major infrastructure project. That should not be happening, regardless of which party. It's bad for Queensland, it's bad for Brisbane. So we all need to be on board with these major projects. The good news is most of these projects have an incubation period of long enough so that they've been through successive governments. But hopefully from here on, we don't see any threats to cancel any of these projects. I don't think there will be, but that would be a bad outcome.
Are there any other questions from the floor?
Joel Dry from the 7 Network. I guess this is a question for the gentlemen that have had to attract funding, not publicly funded projects. How difficult was it to get such vast amounts of money into southeast Queensland, and compare that to, say, 10 years ago, if you have any experience with trying to bring that money, be it interstate or overseas money, into southeast Queensland?
Joel, good question. Look, we spoke to a number of parties and had lots of options for Howard Smith Wharves. I mean, Brisbane is a really attractive investment proposition. When you chat to particularly offshore investors, when they look at the fundamentals of this city, they can't understand why more locals are not backing projects here. When you look at it from a macro perspective, when you look at the level of investment that's happening, the connection to Asia, all of these offshore people are saying that Brisbane, for them, in many circumstances, makes a huge amount of sense. So for our experience, funding a project like Howard Smith Wharves, which is a little bit unique, was not overly challenging. Obviously, you're looking for the right terms, but there's a lot of interest out there. There is a lot of money in the world still slushing around that's looking for smart investments, and I know that a lot of that money is looking at Brisbane right now.
How important is it to keep funding local, or is that not? I mean, in the current state of the world, do you have to look overseas for funding of big projects?
No, I don't think you do. I think that inherently some of the funders onshore are more conservative in their approach and have different investment hurdles. As I say, globally there is a lot of money in the global economy, and they're all looking for places to increase their returns. If you look at some countries, they're almost at negative interest rates. So it's really compelling for them to come to a country like Australia. In Brisbane, I agree, our sovereign risk profile has varied slightly over the last few years, but in the main, Australia is a really good place to invest. Our big four banks keep our financial systems in pretty good check compared to what else is happening around the world.
Yeah, I think also with all these projects of scale, staging is a critical issue because they're over many years, and it's from our side of things, we look at the return on investment on the end of project position rather than the stages, which is really important because with early stages you need to create the experience, which is usually capital heavy, and a lot of the Australian investments don't really invest in that upfront infrastructure to create the experience. Fortunately, we are a Japanese company who have those long-term views, and so they're willing to invest in the upfront experience to then get the return at the end of the project, which is, it's a big investment, it's a big challenge, it's a big gutsy move, but they see that that's the right thing, and they really rely on the growth, and they see Brisbane as having the greatest growth potential out of all the cities in Australia.
Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, Harry Spicer from 4BC Radio. My question's to the two urban developers in the room. The traditional Queensland lifestyle, many people here would have grown up, maybe on a large block in a Queenslander with a pool. Is our population growth set to change that? Are we going to see more urban developments like this in the future, and are they going to spread to the suburbs?
I think I'm the only residential, one of the only residential. But I think it comes down to our view on neighbourhoods. We do see the trend of the population wanting to live where they're working and live where they want to socialise. And I think at the moment the obvious choice in that is within the sort of 5K ring, and that's where it's at the moment. And I think that will potentially grow outside of it, but there is a lot of opportunity for that to happen still within it. So I don't think the backyard's certainly not dead, but as I think you've got to look at the stages in life, and we're seeing a lot of interest in our project, particularly which we call active resizers as the demographic of working parents, both mum and dad, with kids that are actually still at university, still at school or university, and where the kids and the parents are making the decision as to where they're going to move next. So the kids want to actually, the kids are still staying at home, but only for a few more years, and then they're choosing these urban areas because it's the place that they want to socialise, and the parents get to enjoy that, and then they don't have to look after the maintenance of the pool and the garden and those sort of things. So that's a definite trend. We've seen that happen in the last sort of 9 to 12 months, and that I think will evolve as the population develops.
I think adding to that, Brisbane has a range of underutilised sites within close proximity to the CBD. So where we have these unique opportunities, they create the basis and the opportunity for exciting high-density mixed-use developments. Herston Quarter is an example of that. West Village is a great example of that, and there are many, many others. The important thing then is that the infrastructure projects that we've talked about respond and provide the accessibility and amenity that means that moving around the inner suburbs where these developments are happening is easy and convenient, and that the amenity follows.
I might jump in. In relation to one of our sites is at Wollongabba, and there's an opportunity there that we're doing market sounding on at the moment in relation to that mixed use type of development. There's about 6-7 hectares of developable land there which will provide that connection between the station and the stadium. But we're looking at development that is consistent with what you're talking about there, the type of mixed use where people have different size, scale, needs. They still want open space, so a town centre type of thing, but having close proximity to transport means they don't necessarily need cars. I was recently speaking to the people who are doing the development out at Stratford, north of London, and then also near St Pancras Station. And their car park ratios at Stratford, it's actually 0 car parks, and at St Pancras it's 25%. And then they have affordable housing as well as higher end housing on the same estate. And when you look at the buildings, you physically can't tell which one is the other. So there is that sort of growth demand. I mean, the Gabba site is 5 kilometres from the CBD, 3 minutes on the train. So we're getting very strong responses in relation to that.
Yes.
Ruth McCosker from the Brisbane Times. So how important do you think shared green spaces are in southeast Queensland infrastructure projects, and how do you balance your commercial interest with the public's need for these spaces should the council pay for them?
I'll have a crack at that one. Only because very much that's a key part of what we're trying to do at Waterfront Precinct. As I said, when in the CBD, to actually create new public space is not a cheap thing to do, mainly because of the density. So the opportunity to sort of both enhance the Riverwalk space and actually create a generous space that allows people to interact with the river, together with sort of pulling development back from the water and actually giving back the waterfront back to the people, looking at the civic space you can actually create there, which can act as a sort of a civic function, and they can operate in a way that it doesn't impact the surrounding buildings. It can work 24/7, is really important, because I think density is not a bad word. If you create high quality spaces that are flexible, that can be curated 365 days a year to provide a broad range of experiences. Now, that doesn't really matter whether it's West Village or in the CBD or at Herston. The principle stays the same. If you create good places that you can activate and provide interest, you will get diversity of user. So it is a challenge. Waterfront is a unique example of where, through the ownership that we had, has provided an opportunity to unlock that on part of the city. But it is a challenge, particularly in the CBD, when your core spaces are obviously the Botanic Gardens, Roma Street Gardens, Post Office Square. If you're going to create it, you really need to create really flexible, high-quality spaces that are serviced, that can provide that sort of platform for curation to enhance the experience.
One of the things Cross River Rail have been working on is the space that we need external from an arena, because we're looking for about 4 hectares of space. You have to be able to hold your crowd outside the arena, and you have to be able to empty them into that space as well. So what can that space be 365 days a year? It's effectively civic space. It could be wasted, or it could be activated and used. And I think the landscape designers, precinct designers at Cross River Rail have got on this, are looking at how can that be even better than what the activation has been in King George Square for many years. We're looking at external stages on the arena to be able to use that 7 days a week, hopefully every weekend, for a range of things other than just events that are in the building. I think that's an obligation for all of these developments. But there will be some green, and for Barton Green, there will be a palm tree in the rear courtyard for Keith Richards.
But I'll just add one point to the private ownership of public space. I think is really important as as an opportunity, because it does give you opportunities to link, for in our case, residential with the park, where we can use the recycled water or grey water from the residential to irrigate the parkland, so that we have a green park throughout the year through our next coming drought. And then also with the retail, by using a zero food waste to landfill program, where we can recycle the food waste to create the mulching onto the landscape, so that it's always kept green and fertilised and the like. So that's sort of a closed loop system, which is quite difficult to do through the regulatory issues with state and local government parklands. But I think that gives an opportunity to sort of showcase how it can be done, and then hopefully over time integrate into public parks.
And it's really interesting, Ruth, when you look at the major projects which are being showcased here, funded mostly privately, and all of them have really large tracts of public open space as part of their plan. So I think as a city we're really getting our mojo on in terms of understanding climatically what Brisbane is a place to live and how people like to use it, and part of that is these outdoor spaces, and each of us have recognised it in our own ways. And we're creating very different public spaces, really complementary to each other. At Howard Smith Wharves, 2.7 hectares, over 80% of the site is public open space. For us, we see that as really exciting. It's bringing people down to the precinct that might not normally have been there, and then engaging with some of the hospitality experiences on site. It's bringing people down there in the morning to do yoga at 6 a.m. in the morning, but then in the evening creating other opportunities for people to come. So I think as a city, we just are now really recognising the ways that we can use these spaces, and that's how people want to use them, get in there and be outdoors.
There's a bit of a minority view that all public space should be publicly owned, and I think that's the root of the question. The reality is the city and the state would not be able to afford to provide these public spaces if it was all publicly owned. And so with development, with partnerships with business, we're able to provide much more than the city could actually afford to provide. And there's examples all the way along this row here of where that's happening. And the council, for example, if we had to provide that, simply wouldn't have the resources to do it. Some of the best new public spaces are actually privately owned. And you have a look at plenty of examples around the city where that occurs.
And I think, Geoff, the point you made earlier about this free space is that if you get the locals to come, I mean, they will come to the free spaces, they will come and use them, and that is what makes it attractive to the tourists. So you have to have those free spaces.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, South Bank is this wonderful story that we've had, and it's exactly what it tells us and it reminds us. It showcases our subtropical city. It's all about the outdoors. It's got the activation. We take our families there. We all visit. We were there, a lot of us on the weekend before last, watching River Fire. We're celebrating in that zone. But you think about it, tourists, you go to New York, you want to go eat a hot dog, you want to go to Central Park, you want to do all the things that the locals do. It's no different when they come here. So if we focus on activating spaces for locals, and whether it's public investment or private investment, we create great spaces which showcase our city and get locals to activate and use them, then that's a success story. And that's what we've got to keep doing.
The average punter is not in the slightest bit interested in who owns the place. It's whether they can go there and enjoy the lifestyle and opportunities. And so most of the time people wouldn't know who owns it. They might assume it's all owned by a council, but a lot of it is private.
Did we have any other questions from the floor? Yes.
Thank you. Glenn Norris from the Courier Mail. Just follows up from Ruth's question about public spaces. I mean, a lot of these projects are butting up against the South Bank or public buildings. Given that we seem to find it acceptable now to advertise a horse race on the Opera House, would it be acceptable, say, for Star Entertainment to advertise their casino on the walls of the cultural centre, seeing that's probably the equivalent of the Opera House for Brisbane?
You can do it at Brisbane Live, Geoff.
Who would like to...
There's already advertising on the side of the Cultural Centre last time I checked.
Advertising about cultural events.
I suppose they're advertising about cultural events, about the shows that are on. Are we going to see...
I don't think any of us see shifting from what we do today. What you want to be promoting is the drivers and activities that bring people to the city. Those areas are about showcasing. I mean, QPAC do a great job at the moment showcasing the performers and the events that are coming. That's what that's for, and that's what it should be done. I think the key from a tourism perspective, and you look at what we do, I mean, our tourism and focus is putting it on a billboard in another city in another country. That's where we want to be showcasing our city. We want to be getting people to come here. So you'll see us advertising in other parts of the world, telling people to come to Australia, to come to Brisbane, check out the Gold Coast. When it comes to the actual heart of the city, let's just focus on showcasing what's on, what the events are. But certainly from our perspective, that's what those places are for.
Were there any... Yes.
Hi, Isabel from ABC Radio. This is specifically about the cruise ship terminal. If it's built obviously near Portside, is there an expectation that ships that were docking at Portside will go to the new terminal? And then is there a concern for businesses at Portside, and has that been considered?
It has been considered. The simple fact is that by 2020, 2/3 of the world's cruise fleet will be too large to get to Portside. So the location that we've chosen is actually at the mouth of the river, and that will facilitate the largest ocean-going mega ships to call 15 minutes from the airport, 50 minutes from the CBD. Were that not to be the case, then quite frankly, these ships would sail by because they can't access the current facilities. The current facilities are upriver, which limits the size of the vessel by draft and by length and by air draft. So it was a case of build this new facility and keep up with this growing market, or allow that entire business to atrophy on the vine.
So will the smaller boats, though, stop with you? Will they no longer go into Portside?
I'm not at liberty to comment. That's really the commercial choice of those operators. We are simply building a facility that can cater to all classes of vessels for a long time into the future.
So that will be their choice as to where they come into port, either with you or further in Portside?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Were there any other questions?
Gentlemen, Stuart Late from Australian Associated Press. You collectively represent a wide range of projects, and these will all come online over the next sort of 5 to 10 years, as you've been talking about this afternoon. Is there anything that we're missing? Is there any project that Brisbane currently needs that is not currently in the pipeline?
Plenty. There needs to be a pipeline. I think that's the reality. There's 5 years worth of projects here, but if we stop then, we will lose the momentum that we've gained. And so it's like I said earlier, the real debate now should be which transport projects happen after Cross River Rail and Brisbane Metro. What are the next iterations of that? We definitely need those that pipeline of projects going forward. Otherwise, we will lose that momentum. So it's an essential thing.
Yeah, I might add to that too. Like the story that's in the Courier Mail today about the fast rail. I mean, the bottom line is you wouldn't be able to get through the inner core without this duplication that we're talking about, doubling the capacity in the inner core. So while the work is in the inner core for Cross River Rail and making it 48 trains per hour capacity, it's pointless having the experience where you could go a fast rail, say, from Gold Coast, and then you end up with this congestion in the middle where you can't actually get to your destination, so it sort of diminishes that benefit. So it's all part of an iterative development. And Brisbane Metro, for example, is allowing the freeing up of buses out of the inner core that can be used in connecting routes further around. So it's part of an evolution that we will sort of see. And I think there was Bernard Salt made some commentary around the driverless vehicles as well too. So those things will come on board, but I think we've got to get the fundamentals, that core right, allowing that flow, then that enables those other future developments to come.
Were there any other questions? No? Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening to us today. I'm going to thank our guests. We have Andrew Thompson, Matt Beasley, Gert-Jan de Graaff, Harvey Lister, Graeme Newton, Adrian Schrinner, Geoff Hogg, Roy Cummins, Luke Fraser and Richard McLachlan. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And you can visit the Queensland Media Club website for a visual recording of today's speech, which has been proudly powered by JPL Media. I'd once again like to acknowledge our naming rights sponsors, Brisbane Airport Corporation, Civil Contractors Federation and Griffith University, as well as our other sponsors. And if you would like to receive information about the Queensland Media Club season, please drop your business card in the bowl at the registration desk on your way out. Well, that does bring us to the conclusion of the lunch. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for your candour. It's been lovely to talk to you all. Thank you, everyone.